Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Mr. Hayes here on Monday morning, November 9th. Had some time to pre-record my mini lesson today, so I figured that would be the best way to go for this Monday morning. As you know, we have already started our CQA work by writing our major claim, our three baby claims, and picking out the three quotes which align to those baby claims. If you have not done those things yet from Friday's planner, that's priority number one. Don't even continue with this video until you finish that. I'm here to help you as well. If you're a little bit behind or feeling uncertain about any of those parts of that planner from Friday, I am here to help. So reach out if you need that. But if you are done with that, you have done all that you need to up to this point, you're ready to move on to today's lesson. This is going to be the video that will help guide you in that direction. We're talking developing context here today. So as you know, we're beginning with our body paragraph work and then expanding to intro and conclusion later on in the week. That's the process we're going to take with this 5-paragraph CQA. Today is going to be looking at context and tomorrow analysis to finish our body paragraphs. A little hint, a little tip of advice here. The better you do, the more focused you are, the more complete your planner is, the better off you're going to be down the road. If you kind of do this 50%, you don't really care about doing the planner to the best of your ability. You're going to have to play major catch up later in the week. You're not going to have a Google Doc with your 5-paragraph CQA on it that you're proud of. You're going to have to fill in a lot of gaps. But if you do this really 100% now, you fill out this context part today, the analysis tomorrow, you pick out your best quotes, you're basically going to be able to just copy and paste from your planner over to the Google Doc, which you'll eventually turn in as your final product. It's going to be a really easy road if you do the hard work right now with the planner. So please keep that in mind. Let's talk context today. So this is going to be a little bit different slightly from the context you wrote with your 1-paragraph CQAs back in late September, early October. Here are 3 tips that are going to help you, help guide you when you're writing today. The first tip is the context part of each paragraph will not summarize the book as a whole, like in your 1-paragraph CQA, but instead only the scene of the quote. So in the 1-paragraph CQA, we kind of had 2 parts to our context. We had the general summary, which is about the book as a whole, and then we had the specific summary, which is the scene of the quote leading into your quote. Obviously, with 3 body paragraphs, if we did a general summary about the book as a whole for each body paragraph, that would be super repetitive and frankly obnoxious. We don't need to do that over and over again. We're going to do that in the intro paragraph later on in the week. Instead, in our context, we just have to describe the scene of the quote. And you want to aim for about 4 to 5 sentences for this context. So as you see here in the second bullet point, in your body paragraphs, the first sentence should be the baby claim, as you know from our exemplars, and then you begin your context, and the context should be around 4 sentences or so. You want to be purposeful and efficient with your context. You don't want to be too flowery, meaning including a bunch of information that's not necessary to understanding the scene of the quote. Instead, you want to make sure each sentence really counts, each sentence is purposeful, it explains what has to be explained. That was my big problem as a writer, especially in high school. I remember when I was a sophomore, my English teacher would have a red pen and just cross out sentence after sentence in my CQAs because I said too much. There was too much unnecessary information and the essentials got lost in that. So you want to be very purposeful and efficient, aim for around a 4-sentence context. That seems to be kind of the happy medium, the perfect number for not saying too much, but not saying too little either and having your reader be confused. So about 4 to 5 sentences is perfect. The tip for your context is to zoom out to zoom in. What I mean by zoom out to zoom in is you can begin your context in more broad terms, maybe not as the book as a whole. You don't have to explain who Junior is, but you can explain more about what's going on generally in the book in that moment, that chapter, what's happening in that chapter. Introduce kind of the setting and a major conflict, and of course, say a character. In the case of your CQA, the memoir author's name. You can begin more broadly, but as you get closer and closer to that quote, you want to be more specific about what's going on in that scene. And really, by the end of the context, you're describing specifically what's going on in that scene. You're really honing in on that moment in time. So here's some tips to keep in mind. I think this will make a lot more sense here once we get to my exemplar. So what you will do today is you're going to write your context, of course, and add it to the baby claim and quote, which you have already written from Friday. If you go back to Friday's planner, it's going to look like this, right? You got your baby claims and your quotes. Today's planner, which will be on the next page of the module, it'll open it up for you, is going to look like this, the CQA body paragraph planning. The first step towards doing this is simply a copy and paste for your baby claim and the quote that you've already done from Friday's planner. So if I were to go back to Friday's, I've got my baby claim number 1. I simply just have to copy and paste that over to today's. And it has the directions right there for you as a reminder. I've already done the baby claim. I'm just moving that over. I've already done the quote too that goes with it. So I'll simply copy and paste that here and follow the directions here. Okay, so now, of course, your job is to write the context that is going to be sandwiched in between that baby claim, that first sentence of your body paragraph, and that quote. So that's your job for today, those 4 sentences or so. I want to show you my example from the module here. So my CQA that I'm writing in real time with all of you right now is an identity shift for Junior when he starts to gain more confidence and see himself in a new light throughout the book. So my baby claim here for one of my body paragraphs is Junior's identity shifts dramatically when he spends the night in the hospital with his basketball coach, exchanging stories and helping each other cope with the stress of the game against Welpinit. A key word here is when. In your baby claims, make sure you're describing that moment that you're going to capture in your quote. And the when word is a good bridge to kind of the starting sentence stem of that baby claim. Junior's identity shifts dramatically, and then also describing that moment. When is a nice middle word in between those 2 parts of your baby claim. So don't hesitate to use this to kind of bridge into describing that moment in time in your quote. So that's my first sentence, my baby claim of my body paragraph. I've already got my quote done here. So now I need to describe the scene of the quote in my context. The quote here is, remember when Junior's talking to the coach after Rowdy knocks Junior out, he's in the hospital. The quality of a man's life is in direct proportion to his commitment to excellence. It's perfect for you. This is the coach talking. I've never met anybody as committed as you. So coach and I sat awake all night. We told each other many stories, but I never repeat those stories. That night belongs to just me and my coach. This quote right here has those 3 things I talked about Friday. It's very clear and that it aligns to the baby claim. It's well written. It's very powerful, very emotional, and it has layers of meaning. I can break down this part in a sentence in my analysis with the Vince Lombardi quote. I could talk about the coach and I sat awake all night and that he's finally got an adult figure that he can look up to, how much that meant to Junior. There's a lot of ways I can break this quote down so it hits all those important points. So now I have to write the context that goes with it, that leads up to it, right? So I'm going to zoom out to zoom in. I'm going to start with my first sentence here, which is a little bit more broad about kind of what's happening in the chapter as a whole and in that moment in Junior's life as a whole before I get closer and closer to the quote and describe this scene in the hospital. So my first sentence here is Junior's freshman season at Riordan. You can see it's a bit more broad already. Begins with the much anticipated return to the reservation to face his old classmates, notably his former best friend Rowdy, known for his violent and vengeful tendencies. So again, setting that stage, I've got the setting here with the old reservation basketball game. Freshman season, what's happening in the plot at the time. I've got my main character, Junior, and a side character, Rowdy. Of course, Riordan's another setting. I'm setting up this conflict between the 2 friends. This is, again, broadly what's going on in the book at that moment. And then I get closer and closer to the quote. During the game, and prompted by the cruel actions of the Welpinit crowd, Rowdy throws a wild elbow at Junior's head, knocking him unconscious and giving him a serious concussion. After Junior's parents leave the hospital and Riordan loses the game handily, he is visited by his basketball coach, zooming in here to the scene, whose compliment during tryouts gave Junior the confidence to prove himself worthy of making the varsity team. So a little callback here. I mentioned this because it's so important to establishing that the coach is on Junior's side. Remember, he says, "Oh, you're actually that really good shooter from the reservation, aren't you?" And then help Junior bounce back and take on Roger. Felt like that was worth mentioning. And then I set up here with my 4th sentence right into the quote. The coach agrees to stay up all night with Junior, offering more words of encouragement and wisdom. You can see how that blends perfectly into the words of wisdom the coach says. So I've got my 4 sentences here. I start with my baby claim. I've got a really powerful quote. I zoom out to zoom in. It's exactly what I'm looking for the context of your body paragraphs. A couple things I want to clarify. Number 1, the idea here of how you properly cite quotations. You can see here not only how I properly punctuate it, but how I properly cite it is established within this. When you have a quote within a quote, So what I mean by this is every single quote that you choose for your CQA, you're going to have the double quotes at the start and the double quotes at the end. But if you have somebody talking, as you can see, the coach is speaking here. He's saying the quality of a man's life, etc. You're going to have a single quote when the coach or the person starts actually speaking out loud, and then a single quote, you can see here, when the coach actually stops speaking out loud. So in this case, you might have the double quote and then a single quote that captures the spoken out loud, the verbal words, and then end that single quote when it's back to Junior's brain. So coach and I sat awake all night. We told each other many stories. That's coming from Junior's head. He's not saying that verbally. So that's where you'd end the single quote. You still have the double quotes, though, at the beginning and the end of the entirety of the quote. That might be a little bit complicated. If you have any questions about this, I'd be more than happy to double check and make sure it's punctuated properly today. Also keep in mind the end here with the citation. I don't need the author's last name because I've already mentioned the author's last name in my major claim. So I don't have to put, in this case, Alexi each time or Noah, Hickam, etc., the different authors of our memoirs. Instead, just the page number is fine. Notice how I have the end quote here right after coach, the last word of the quote, then the page number in parentheses, and then a period. This is how you properly finish and wrap up that quote before then you get into your analysis, of course. So keep this formatting in mind. Make sure yours matches what mine does. And again, I'm here for questions if you have any issues with punctuating or properly citing your quotes today. Last thing I want to clarify. So after I'm done with this, right, I would, in your case, you're going to be typing it in the planner, but I take my context, write it right here in context number 1. If you have time left today and you feel comfortable writing your analysis, you can start on it. I'm going to have a lesson on it tomorrow. That's going to be our focus for Tuesday. But if you feel comfortable enough starting it, you remember some of the techniques and sentence stems, like this shows me, this reveals, this is important, this connects to, all those from September and October CQAs from early on in the year, go ahead and give it a shot. I mean, worst case, this is just a planner. It's a rough draft. You're just brainstorming. Heck, even if it's just some bullet points, anything you can capture in the analysis once you're done with your 3 context for your 3 body paragraphs, go nuts. See if you can give it a shot. Do it on your own, while keeping in mind that tomorrow I'll have more of a thorough lesson on writing this part of your CQA body paragraphs. So to restate, your homework for tonight is to finish all 3 context parts of your planner. So I'd finish context number 1, context number 2, context number 3, while I'm also copying and pasting those baby claims and quotes over from Friday's planner. The analysis is optional until tomorrow. Whether you're at home on Zoom or in person in my classroom today, I am here at your service for the entirety of the period. Don't hesitate to ask me to look over something, check to make sure you're efficient with your wording and your context, you've punctuated your quotes properly, whatever comes to mind. If you're struggling with ideas, I am here to help you. So don't hesitate to ask. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Monday, and we'll talk soon.